Okay, pop quiz for everybody who's watching today. Uh, Not a hard question. If you had to fight a war, or if your country has to fight a war, and you have an option between who you're going to have to lead you, would you rather have, on the one hand, people who love unicorns and rainbows and want to tell you all about how good things can be, and they want to be positive and uplifting, or would you rather have somebody, well, let's say somebody like George Patton, somebody who's tough, not popular with saying the right things, is harsh sometimes, or maybe even like a Doug McGregor, who often says things that are not popular, and and says them in ways that are ruffle feathers and stuff. Who would you rather have calling the shots if your life were on the line? I think that's a self-evident question. It's kind of a not a fair question because the answer is so obvious. If only it were obvious to those who actually have power in our country, how much better would our world be right now? How much more secure would our country be than what it actually is? Now, I'm just going to lay out just a handful of things. Many of these things we've talked about before, but when you see things in context and when you see them put together, and then you look on the ground at the reality of the situation, this will probably make you mad. I'll just tell you that right up front, because it obviously makes me mad. That's why we're making this video, because as we always say, we're unintimidated and uncompromised on bringing you the truth. And folks, this here is some truth today, something you need to know about. Now, we're going to look at specifically at the Russia-Ukraine war and the way both Ukrainian and American leaders and NATO leaders have gone about telling you unicorns and rainbows story that shields you from the truth. Don't let that pass you by. What they say shields you from the truth. It doesn't tell you the truth. It obfuscates, and it prevents you from seeing what's actually going on, and confuses people. Well, we're going to get rid of a lot of that fog today. We're going to show you what's actually truth. But to lay this out, let's start off here with looking at what happened around the Ukrainian counteroffensive this past summer. Now, as was heading into, especially from January of 2023 all the way through the spring, there was this almost relentless drumbeat of the Ukraine side is building up for war. The West is training them at training bases in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. They're getting, German tanks, British tanks, French tanks, American air defense systems, some of our best U.S. best armored personnel carriers, all kinds of ammunition, rockets, missiles, everything in the world. And so everybody was telling you this is going to change the war. I remember, and we've shown it on previous episodes here. You had David Petraeus emphatically go on BBC in May of 2023 and saying very specific reasons why Ukraine was going to succeed and might even cause the Russian defense to completely collapse. That was his claim on March, I believe it was May 31st or something close to that, before the event was launched. Well, days later, the Wall Street Journal, actually just on the eve of the launch of this, on June 3rd, interviewed Ukrainian President Zelensky and asked him what he thought on the eve of this attack.
Я вважаю, що на сьогодні ми готові вже це робити. Ми хотіли би деякі речі дійсно просто мати, але ми не можемо чекати на це місяці. А ми дуже віримо в успіх. Я не знаю, скільки нам для цього знадобиться часу.
Now, he said, he was very confident he was going to succeed. They didn't know how long it was going to take. Some people were saying, hey, this is going to be a blitzkrieg-like, operation. And they could storm all the way through like what the Nazis did in France in 1940, perhaps, and break through it in mere weeks, go all the way to the Channel Coast in that case, or go all the way to the Azov Coast in this case. Some people were jitty that was actually possible, but that's not how it worked out. So that was June 3rd. And on about June the 4th or 5th, depending on how you want to look at, the different events, that's when the thing started. And sure enough, that was Ukraine's plan, was to have a blitzkrieg type attack, because that's what we had trained them for. That's what we had equipped them for. And that was the actual plan. We now know, because the Washington Post came out a month or so ago with a detailed analysis of exactly what happened. That was the plan that was helped created in large part by Pentagon leaders that said, hey, this is a plan that can go, and here's the training, here's the ammunition, here's the equipment, here's all the things you need to get that done. or so they said. But right away, things started going south. And the 47th Mechanized Brigade, which was supposed to be the spearhead, which had lots of press that got all of the training and all of the best equipment, all the Western stuff, and had the best leaders, that was supposed to be the spearhead unit to make the first penetration through the Russian defensive lines, through which other units and other armored corps would then follow in behind. That was the plan. Didn't happen. Wasn't going well at all. And so about 10 days after the thing started, on the 15th of June, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, Reznikov, was interviewed by Fox News to ask, hey, what's going on? Here's what he had to say.
So it's some kind of preparation operation, with a shape operation, certainly. And we understand that they use very strong defense lines, especially minefields.
So this is not the main assault.
No.
This is not the blitzkrieg with the Western
Oh,
armor.
no. We will win this war because we are fighting for our country with our partners. We have no other choice. It's surviving. It's like David and Goliath. So we are David, and we will win this war.
But how long? It could be years.
I think this year will be like a game changer.
2023 definitely be a game changer. And he lied there. Let's just put that on the table. He flat out lied when he said, oh, no. This wasn't the main thing. This is just shaping operations, because they had to try to cover over for the fact that their actual armored punch went right into a brick wall and didn't even dent the lines of the Russians at the beginning. Stoltenberg, for his part, right around this same time, also acted like, no, they're actually succeeding. Here's what he said.
It's critical time for Ukraine because you have just launched the counteroffensive. You are making gains. It's fierce fighting. And the gains you are making is due to the courage, the skills, the bravery of the Ukrainian armed forces. And we pay our tribute and our great respect to what they are delivering every day. It highlights also the importance of support from NATO allies to sustain and step up the military support. We see that the support and the training NATO allies and partners have delivered is making a difference on the battlefield every day.
So Stoltenberg's trying to tell everybody, hey, our help that we did, our training and all the stuff we gave you, it's making a difference. That's what's allowing you guys to go forward. And you're making gains every day. That was a lie. They weren't making gains. Stoltenberg knew it. Now, a month later, when things continued to go wrong and they continued to not make progress against the Russians, now then they're going to trot out a uniform. So they're going to bring in Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, who's going to go in and sound really rough and gruff and tough and look like a strong leader when he told you this.
As Ukraine continues its counteroffensive, we are reminded that real war is not war on paper. Real war is unpredictable. It's filled with fear and fog and friction. Real war is brutal. The crucible of combat has enormous costs in terms of killed, wounded, displaced persons, and refugees. And yet, despite the enormous costs, the Ukrainians are advancing steadily and deliberately, braving brutal and bloody battles to reclaim their homeland.
So here's now Milley. Again, he lied. Ukraine is making steady advances. That was complete BS. They weren't making steady progresses. As a matter of fact, it was shocking to NATO, to the Pentagon, that holy cow, all these timelines we had. Listen to this. This is exposed in the Washington Post in last month. They expected to be at past a place called Robotina about 4 days in, so that they could go to a place called Tokmak, where they thought they would have to have their first big tough fight on their way to the Azov coast. That was the plan. Pentagon leaders said that, according to this Washington Post report, that they had about a 50-50 shot to make it to the Azov coast. A 50-50 shot. Now, if you know anything about some of our previous episodes here, or any of the things that I have been writing since months before that operation was launched, there was never any chance. There wasn't even a 5% chance. The only chance that would have existed would have irrationally, after almost 2 years or a year and a half of war at that time, that Russia would just run from their positions. And that's so unreasonable to even think that's going to happen. Yet that was the only thing upon which you could even have a fantasy hope that maybe it would succeed. Of course they didn't. They fought very hard because they had spent months, up to 9 months, building a very elaborate, long defensive line that would give them the confidence not to run. So there was no prospect for a Ukrainian victory, and yet the Pentagon seemed to think maybe it was, and then they start lying to you and telling you that in fact that it was going. Now we now know for sure that it wasn't true, but that doesn't stop them. And so let's add the Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, who also in, I believe it was about the middle of June, again, when it's very clear this is not working and reports are coming in of all of this Western aid that we've been given and these, top launch battle tanks and all this kind of stuff are getting blown up by the Russians. He's got to cover that somehow. So cue Austin.
Regarding battlefield losses of vehicles and equipment, this is a war. So we know that there will be battle damage on both sides. What's important is that, the Ukrainians have the ability to recover equipment that's been damaged, repair where possible, get that equipment back into the fight. And also that we have the means to continue to push capability forward. So there will continue to be battle damage. I think the Russians have shown us that same 5 vehicles about 1,000 times from 10 different angles. But quite frankly, the Ukrainians still have a lot of combat capability, combat power.
Yeah, so they have a lot of combat power left. And as it turns out, they had a lot of people yet to go into a meat grinder to be killed for nothing because of the lack of vision or the lack of knowledge, I don't know which, of the senior leaders here. Now, to quickly sum up, you have heard from the president of Ukraine. You have heard from the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, the American Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the General Secretary General of NATO. All of those guys have told you that the offensive was going well, that it was succeeding. It was tough. It was a difficult fight, but it was succeeding. And Ukraine was making methodical, deliberate progress forward. We now know it is an absolute fact that we're all lies. They knew it, and they still told you that so that people would continue to support it. Now, explain to me why, when you had all of these elite people, the top of the round, can't figure out what's going on. They don't know what's happening. And then you have a YouTuber who is one of the most brilliant, accurate voices out there. We're going to show you just a brief clip from Alex of History Legends, who we've had on our show before, lay out for you at the same time that these people were telling you things were succeeding. Here's what he told you.
During these 2 days, Ukraine also lost 17 Bradley infantry vehicles, model M2A2 ODS SA. 17 out of the 99 that this unit had. 6 more days of combat like this, and the brigade is gone, eliminated. Put simply, and I brought it up many times, Ukraine doesn't have enough engineering vehicles for all their axes of attack. Or perhaps demining the path they wanted to use took much longer than expected. So many army columns ended up static in open ground for long periods of time. Like this one you can see, composed of 12 tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, all in a very compact formation. The Ukrainian army column had not even reached the advanced outpost of the Russian line of defense that enemy howitzers started singing and unleashed a heavy artillery barrage on the Ukrainian columns. This is where the Russians swarmed the attacking force with their new Lancet 3 anti-armor drones.
So Alex had it pegged exactly. As a matter of fact, if you watch his channel, History Legends, he called this before it ever happened. He said they should actually cancel this because it was doomed for failure, and he laid out the very exact reasons why. And now he was showing in these few clips here exactly why. And there's plenty more of that where that came from. If you want more on that channel, you can certainly find out because he's got it all out there. But that gets back to the question that we're asking at the beginning of this. Do you want someone running your defense industry and running your army who is all about rainbows and unicorns and claiming all these successes? Because look, this is what they want to be true. They want the Ukraine side to succeed. They want the Russian side to lose. They want all the training that we provided, all of our gear. They want it all to succeed. So they just say it did. Even though there is graphic evidence at the time they're saying it, much less now, almost 6 months later, more than 6 months later, when it's a fact that they were lying and that was never true. And here's the problem that I got, one of many. Look, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, but how come nobody is going back to every one of those people I just showed you a clip of and asking them, hey, you told us this at this time. Alex explained this at the same time. So it's not like things changed later. That was the way things were at the time. It was not succeeding. You told us it was. Why? I want to put them on the hot seat. How come they tell us things that aren't true and they keep giving this fiction, this unicorns and rainbows mentality, when what it's resulting in, it's not just an embarrassment. It's not just, well, they're just lying and maybe we should replace them. Folks, people are dying because of this. Ukrainian cities are getting wiped out because of the unwillingness of Ukrainian, NATO, and American leaders to acknowledge obvious ground truth reality. Now, I'm going to put up a map here on that we get from the Institute of the Study of War that shows you graphically what I'm saying. Again, you don't have to have any knowledge of military experience. You don't have to be a strategic expert. Look at the map on the left of November 22nd, 2022. That's where the lines were. The line of contact was after Ukraine had its singular success of that blue area in the north and the blue area in the south, where they actually drove Russia out of some areas because Russia was unprepared. There's many reasons why it worked out that way, but it was a real, genuine success of the Ukrainian armed forces, and that's where the front lines were in November 2022. Now in January 2024, they're virtually identical. The lines haven't moved. So everything that we've tried to do, all these offensive and everything has not worked. But according to some Ukrainian sources, they have suffered somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 casualties. By some accounts, that's 500,000 killed in action and hundreds of thousands more wounded. We'll never know for sure until the end, but the numbers are astronomical and staggering. Now then, they're trying to force people off the street to try to make up the ground for all that they've lost in number of troops, and people are literally running from the country. We had an episode a couple of days ago that showed you just how bad that is. They're running. On the other side of the line, you have still Russia. They only had to do one forced mobilization of 300,000 around the same time in November of 2022. Now then, since that time, they have volunteers in the neighborhood of 14 to 16,000 per month volunteering to serve. So the Russian army is getting bigger and bigger, and the Ukraine army is shrinking more and more. Now, given all of this history, given everything that's happened up to this point, given all the losses they've had, and now then the fact that there are no more American and Western tanks and armor personnel carriers, there are no more millions of shells to give them. There are no more large numbers of trained Ukrainian troops. They're literally scraping the bottom of the barrel. The average age is like 43 or something because they have to get old people who aren't even equipped to serve. They're not even mentally and physically fit enough to serve, but they got to have them, so they're throwing them in there. Meanwhile, on the Russian side, their military industrial complex is now cranking into full gear. They've created new types of weapon systems, more drones, all different categories of drones, the artillery pieces, artillery shells, rockets, precision guided munitions, jets, helicopters, air defense capacities, large numbers of air defense missiles that they have to prevent Ukraine from doing to Russia what Russia's doing to Ukraine. Folks, you get the point. Everything in the world that anyone who's just looking at reality can tell you, there is no prospect for Ukraine to win this war. And at some point, the Ukrainian army is bound to break. That's historically how it happens. I don't know when it's going to happen, if it's going to happen sooner rather than later. But what I can tell you for an outright certainty is that Ukraine will never muster the offensive capacity to force Russia out so that they can win the war. It's not even possible. Now, given that, why would you want somebody leading you that is going to be blind themselves to the reality and keep giving instructions based on unicorns and rainbows that we're still going to succeed, knowing that that means that real men and real women will die, and in large numbers in Ukraine. Russia will not lose. And then we'll have to face the even difficult part. We'll talk about this in a subsequent episode here. It's going to be a big problem for the whole West, NATO, and America in particular. What are we going to do if Russia actually wins the war? And there is a far greater likelihood of Russia winning even than a stalemate over time. Nothing's guaranteed, even in that regard. But there is no chance for success. And we may have to, of the Ukraine side, and we have to worry about what we're going to do if the worst case happens and Russia actually wins. Now you're going to again run into a situation. No unicorns and rainbow happy talk is going to cover that one. But folks, that's where we are. That's just the reality of it right now. That's what we have to navigate. And that's the kind of people we have leading us right now in Ukraine, in NATO, and in the United States. And until we do something to get some tough people in there and some people who are willing to say they have skills, they have knowledge, they have experience, and they're willing to tell the truth. That doesn't seem like such a high standard to reach to, but we can't even get people to tell the truth in public. That's what we need. And until we get that, you can count on things continuing to go south. And as we have this whole situation, on the verge of exploding in the Middle East with all kinds of violence going left and right, and the opportunity to get sucked into a war, the possibility in the Asia Pacific area where the U.S. could get sucked into a war, potentially with China and Taiwan. God forbid that should happen, but it's certainly a reality. Or this war here continuing to go in the direction it has been. Everywhere you turn, there is trouble for the United States. And until we get to the point that we'll be tough, tell the truth to the American people, things are going to get worse. We're going to keep monitoring this for you. And we're going to keep making videos like this where we're going to say, here's the truth, whether anybody likes it or not, because we're unintimidated and uncompromised on bringing you the truth that you need to know and that your friends and family need to know. So I'm asking you to share this video, like and subscribe, and send it to other people so that they get the truth too. Because when you see these clips I just showed you at the start of this, that's all most people ever see. So they're not aware of the things that you're now aware of. And we need the truth to get out there. And we're going to continue to hold our leaders' feet to the fire, whether they like it or not. Because after all, folks, we're all in this together. And I'm on your side to try to help you out. We will see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.